Today I am going to teach you how to play the master rule set for the tabletop game Heroscape. This is the Age of Annihilation master set from Renegade Game Studios with work from Avalon Hill and Hasbro. So, if you've seen my other how to play Heroscape videos, there probably won't be too much new here. And then after this, I will also do just a separate video to go over the new stuff that came in Wave 1 of Age of Annihilation, which is the Wellspring Water and the Lower Walls. The basic game side of Heroscape is pretty simple, and a few of the rules are similar to the Master game. However, in the Master game, your army figures get serious with special powers and special rules for moving and battling. And because of their extra strength and powers, these warriors can't be defeated so easily. As a Valkyrie General, your mission is to gather a well-balanced army, lead them boldly into battle, and wage war strategically to conquer the enemy. Good luck, and may the best Valkyrie General win. The object is to create a battlefield and choose your army, then fight in the battle of all time. To win, be the first to achieve your victory objective. Some scenarios demand more from you than mere destruction, so be sure to read them carefully and plan your strategy around the battle at hand. For first-time players, if it's your first time playing the Master game, Renegade suggests that you set up the first map shown in the Battlefields and Scenarios book, which comes separately in the Age of Annihilation core set box, and play the Master game scenario that goes with it. This is the Battlefields and Scenarios book. There's a lot of cool stuff. Step number 1 of Heroscape is getting ready to play the Master game by setting up your battlefield. To do this, choose a battlefield and matching Master game scenario from the Battles and Scenarios book. After you've played a few games, you may even want to create your own battlefields and scenarios. There's only the limited by what you have in terrain and your imagination that you can do. Scenarios can be fun, making your own random maps can be fun. That's not a rule, that's just me trailing off. And for example, for this video, I built the map number 3, the Howling Pass. Playing as a team is a thing. Players can choose to play as a team. While teammates play the game separately, they can discuss strategy and offer advice. Victory objectives for teams vary with the scenario, but in most games, they work together toward a common goal. If you're playing in a team game, teammates should sit next to each other on one side of the table, facing their opponents. You can also play with multiple master sets and expansion sets. I'll explain that a little bit later in the video. And here's the basic side of an army card, but in the master game, you will use the master side of the army cards. As in the basic game, each army card features either a hero or a squad with move, range, attack, and defense values. But you'll notice that the master game side of each card has much more information about the figure than its basic game counterpart. As you play, you'll become more familiar with how this information is used during gameplay. There are 20 parts to an army card. Allow me to break them down right now. Up here at number 1 is the Valkyrie symbol. This symbol is a unique mark of the Valkyrie General this figure or figures follow. Then, number 2 is the Valkyrie General who the figures on this army card serve. When building your own army, you may combine army cards from any Valkyrie Generals to create an army that is all your own. Then right here we have the name. This is what the figure or figures on this army card are called. This name may be shortened or abbreviated in the special powers shown on the card. And then we have right here is going to be the species, biological classification of the figures. Then here is their uniqueness. All army cards are either unique or common or uncommon. When selecting army cards for your army, you cannot select more than one of the same unique army card. You may select any number of the same common army card. If you select uncommon, they are treated in unique in every way except for the fact that you can have multiples of them, but each uncommon must have its own army card. Then, number 6, right here, is going to be the hero or squad, and that is going to be all army cards are either hero or squad cards. Hero cards feature a single figure capable of acting on their own in the heat of battle. Squad cards feature 2 or more figures which act together. Your army may include all heroes, all squads, or any combination. Below that is the class, the type of figure. Special powers may sometimes reference this. Then, right here is going to be their personality, and this is the figure's dominant behavior in the world of Heroscape. Special powers may sometimes reference this. Then, right down here, we have the size, the overall weight category of the figure or figures. Then the number following that is their height. This is the number of levels tall this figure or figures are. Right here in this section is going to be the special powers. Most figures have one or more special powers that allow them to go above and beyond the standard attacking, moving, and defending. Up here is going to be the portrait. This is the image of the figure or figures whose army card this is. Number 13 over here is going to be the target point. The green dot shows where you determine the figure's line of sight on each figure that's represented in this zone. Then in the red part around the target point is going to be their hit zone. The red area shows which part of the figures can be attacked, and it's used when determining line of sight. If it's grayed out, that means that part cannot be targeted. Then we've got the life of the figure, the number of wounds it takes to destroy each figure on this army card. Then we have the move. This is the maximum number of spaces the figures may move. Their range, the max number of spaces this figure may attack. And then number 18 down here is going to be the attack itself, the number of dice you roll for the figure's normal attacks. And then 19 is going to be the defense. This is the number of dice you roll when the figure or figures defend. And down here is going to be the point cost. This cost of drafting this army card, or the figures on this army card, into your army. After you've set up your battlefield, and now that you know how an army card is broken down, you gather and place your army. For Master Game scenarios, you can use a preset army or a pre-made army, or you can draft an army. These three ways of gathering an army are explained. As you gather your army, be sure the total points cost does not exceed the point cost limit listed for the scenario you chose. It can be lower, but not higher. Players don't need to have the same number of army cards. For example, you may have 3 army cards while an opponent has 4 or 5 army cards. That is okay. Using a preset army is right here. Some scenarios specify the armies to use. As in the basic game, you choose which preset army you want to control. After choosing your army, place your army cards in front of you, then place your figures on the battlefield where shown in the scenario. So for this one, this would be player 1 or player 2's armies options. Using a pre-made army. Experienced players may know exactly which armies they want based on the scenario, the point cost, their favorite figures, or other factors. If both players agree, they may both supply a custom pre-made army with point cost totals equal to or less than the scenario's point cost limit. If you've already chosen or brought along your army, place your cards in front of you. The players roll the 20-sided die to see who places their army on the battlefield first. Re-roll ties. The highest roller will place their entire army first. Placement then passes to the left. You must place your entire army in one of the scenario's same color starting zones. You cannot place any figures in an enemy-occupied starting zone. If you are combining sets and playing with 3 or more players, unless stated otherwise in the scenario, teammates start in the same starting zone. If there are more figures in your army than spaces in your starting zone, you can't use the extra figures. Drafting an army is a fun way for players to interact and share figures while building their armies, by taking turns choosing which army cards they want to include in their army from a shared pool of figures. When you select an army card, take the figure or figures shown on that card and place them in a starting zone immediately, before the next player selects an army card. You must place your entire army in the same starting zone. You cannot place any figures in an enemy-occupied starting zone. Unless stated otherwise in the scenario, teammates start in the same starting zone. If there are more army figures than spaces in your starting zone, you can't use the extra figures. For a 2-player game, the draft would be as follows. Both players roll the 20-sided die, re-rolling any ties. The player who rolls higher drafts first by choosing 1 army card. This is added to their army. The other player then chooses 2 army cards, adding both to their army as before. Taking turns, each player then chooses 1 army card at a time until they reach the point cost limit, or until no additional figures can be chosen. For drafting in a game with 3 or more players, players draft as follows. All players roll the 20-sided die, re-rolling any ties. The player who rolls the highest drafts first by choosing 1 army card. This card is added to their army. The player to their left then chooses 1 army card, and so on. The last player to draft will choose 2 army cards. Drafting goes back around the table then in reverse direction. The last player, the player who drafted first, chooses 2 army cards. Then the draft reverses direction again. If at any time a player cannot pick another army card because choosing it would exceed their total army point cost limit, that player must pass. If you pass, you have completed your army. Continue going back and forth around the table with the last player in each direction choosing 2 army cards and reversing the draft direction until all players have completed their armies. Friends and enemies. Once all players have gathered their armies, you'll know who is a friend and who is an enemy. All figures represented by army cards in your army are friendly figures. All figures represented by army cards in your opponent's army are enemy figures. Most games of Heroscape are played with only 2 players, but if you combine multiple boxes, you can play with more. In multiplayer games that support teams, figures in your ally's army are also your friendly figures. Note that only figures represented by an army card is in your army are figures you control. If you are playing with a teammate, any effects that target figures you control do not affect your teammate, so plan carefully. Order markers. Each player takes 4 order markers marked 1, 2, 3, and X. In each round, you'll place these markers on your army cards to mark the order in which your figures will move and attack. Then you have wound markers and dice. Place all of the wound markers and the combat dice near the battlefield. The combat dice are used as attack dice when you roll for skulls, and also defense dice when you roll for shields. These are glyphs. Glyphs are magical enhancements that can grant a figure unique and powerful abilities when it lands on them. Some scenarios call for glyphs to be placed on certain spaces. More information on glyphs later. If you have the rulebook handy yourself, that'll be on page 20. The battle will then begin. The game is played over several rounds. A round consists of 3 turns for each player. In scenarios in the book, you have a round tracker with a round marker that you can follow along and reach the end. When using the round tracker that is found in most of the Battlefields and scenario books, you put the round marker on 1 before you start the first round. Place the black round order marker on number 1, and at the end of each round, move it ahead to the next number. Each round of play consists of the following 4 steps. First, you'll place your order markers. Then you'll roll for initiative. And then players will take turns. And then you move the round marker to the next number. Now to explain all these steps in detail. Number 1 is going to be placing your order markers. Once turns begin in step 3, you'll use each turn to move and attack with the figures represented by one of your army cards. During the place order marker step, you must decide which army card you'll use on which turn. Place order markers on those cards, and it would be 1 for the first, 2 for the second, and 3 for the third turn. You may place 2 or more order markers on the same card if you want to use that card 1, 2, or even all 3 of your turns for that round. Be careful how you place your order markers. You cannot change them later unless a special ability or power lets you do that, and you are committed to using those figures in that order for that round. Players place their order markers at the same time. Place your order markers with the numbers facing you so your opponents can't see them. In games with more than 2 players, teammates can look at each other's order marker. Then there's the X order marker. This extra marker is not used on any of your turns unless a special power or ability lets you do so. It is a decoy to prevent your opponents from knowing which 3 order markers you actually intend to use. Place it carefully to misdirect your opponent or trigger a special power on certain figures. If your army includes 2 or more of the same common army card, you don't need to keep these figures separate. That is, keep track of which figures belong to which card. Each order marker placed on a common army card lets you activate any of your figures that belong to one of those common cards, up to the number of figures displayed on that card. So, if you have 2 of the same common squad army card, each showing 3 figures, when you use either of those cards, you can activate any 3 matching figures. And as of right now, there are no Renegade-era common army cards, so here's an older common squad. So if you were to activate it with an order marker, you could move any 4 on that card. I'm sorry, not on that card. But if you had, say, 12 Gladiatrons in your army, an order marker would let you activate any 4 on the battlefield, as long as you had enough Gladiatrons. It does not have to be the same poses and molds, it's any of them. I know I just broke it down, but here's a quick example. In this round, you decide to mobilize Admiral EJ-1M for your first turn, Rackshot Steward of Death for your second turn, then Rackshot Steward of Death again for your third turn, and then you place the X order marker on the naves of the Silver Scimitar to misdirect your opponent. When placing your order markers, you do not have to place them in numerical order. You can place them in varying order just to make sure that your opponent may not be watching you, because if they're watching and you're placing in order, they'll know your turn order. Rolling for initiative is pretty basic. After placing your order markers and before turns begin, each player rolls the 20-sided die for initiative to determine who goes first. The player who rolls the highest results wins initiative and will take the first turn this round. Play then passes to the left. If there's a tie for highest roll, the tying players re-roll. So, for example, we'll just say that Lee, Brad, and Mary are playing. Lee rolls a 7, Brad rolls a 15, and Mary also rolls a 15. Brad and Mary roll again to break the tie. This time Brad rolls a 1 and Mary rolls a 6. Mary won the tiebreaker and will take the first turn. She reveals her order marker 1 and takes her turn with that army card. Play then proceeds to her left regardless of the remaining initiative rolls. Turns continue until all players have taken all 3 of their turns. When the round ends after each player has taken their third turn, the players will again place their order markers and roll for initiative for the next round. On your turn, each player will take 3 turns for the round. Usually you'll take 3 actions on your turn in this order. Number 1 would be reveal your order marker, must always happen. Number 2, move the figures on the army card, optional. And number 3, attack with figures on the army card, also optional. All 3 of these actions will be explained in detail in just a moment. The first and easiest, which you always have to do on the start of your turn, is revealing your order marker for that turn and then laying it number side up on the army card it was placed on. Note that later in the game, it's possible that all the figures represented on that army card have been destroyed. In this case, your turn immediately ends. So if these Frostclaw Paladins decide to beat the crap out of Rackshot, and the Steward of Death is now the Steward of Dead, and it would come upon your turn for the order marker, but there's no figure to activate, your turn just ends. Moving figures on your army card is action 2, which is optional. Now you may move any or all of the figures represented by your chosen army card. If you want to, follow these rules for moving each figure. So we'll say in this example that Loviatok, the Kiri Warrior, is the one who is activated. First, you'll check their move value. You can move a figure in any direction, a number of spaces up to the move value on its army card. Changing direction at will. For example, with a move value of 5, a figure can move 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 spaces. Uneven terrain and water may limit movement, as you'll see soon. And we'll go over the example of basic movement now. Right here, Loviatok, the Kiri Warrior, has a move of 5, so you move her the full 5 spaces toward the opposing figures. Note that Loviatok, the Kiri Warrior, may move through Raylan, the Kiri Warrior, in this example because Raylan is friendly. So it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Note that the order movement for squads is different. You can move a squad's figures in any order you choose, one at a time. Passing and landing on other figures. You can move through a space with a friendly figure on it, your own or your teammates, unless that figure is engaged. That would be engagement and adjacency rules on page 16, which I will go over in this video in a little bit. You can't move through a space with an opponent's figure on it, or end your move on a space with any figure. So, nope. Note that when moving up and you move to a higher level, you must count the side of each higher level as one space, as well as the space you land on. In this example, it would be Dorim the Bulkhead Brawler moving up. You count each side level as you move Dorim the Bulkhead Brawler to the top of this ledge right here. Note that Dorim the Bulkhead Brawler cannot move to the top ledge because it would take more movement than he can get to. His move value is only 5. Some figures have special powers that allow them to fly. And flying is a type of movement that allows figures to pass over the battlefield without needing to spend extra movement up or suffer damage from falls. And that would be page 20 of the rulebook for special powers. So Loviatok 1, 2, 3, 4, well, if you wanted to go that way. Otherwise, Dorim has to go, counting the sides, 1, 2, 3 to get up there. Note that glyphs and water tiles do not add height to a space they are placed on. But this water tile being lower set than the tiles next to it, it would cost this side to move out. And figures have a height limit. A figure cannot move up to a number of levels equal to or higher than its height all at once. So for this example, we'll use Dorim the Bulkhead Brawler again, who is only height 4. And he wishes to move up there. However, Dorim the Bulkhead Brawler is a small guy, so he can only go up to his height 1, 2, 3, 4. Nope, illegal move. Dorim the Bulkhead Brawler cannot move up to the space because it would take 5 moves to reach the top, and his height is only 4. Moving down is a little different, which we are going to use Admiral EJ1M with his height of 7 and his move of 5 here in this example. To move Admiral EJ1M down from this ledge, you don't need to count the sides levels at all. 1. Falling. When a figure moves down to a much lower level, it may be wounded. This is called falling. Falling does not stop a figure's movement, but it may wound or destroy it. Here's the rules for falling. If a figure moves down a number of levels that is equal to or greater than its height, you must roll 1 combat die immediately to see if it's wounded. If you roll a skull, the figure takes a wound. If the drop is 10 or more levels greater than the figure's height, for example, Dorim is a height of 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, that would be his height, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, so it's 10 or more greater than his height. It is considered a major fall, and you must then roll 2 additional dice for a total of 3, and that would be for each skull you roll, add 1 wound marker to that figure's army card. However, if the drop is 20 levels more than the figure's height, it is considered an extreme fall, and you must then roll the 20-sided die. If you roll a 19 or 20, that figure survives without taking any falling damage. If you roll a 1 to 18, that figure is destroyed. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4, Dorim's standard height, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 levels higher. Dorim, let's use you in the example of falling. So poor Dorim here is going to be our example. First, for extreme falling, when you move Dorim the Bulkhead Brawler down from this 21 level cliff, you must roll for extreme fall. 20! He lives. Okay. So then we'll take it now. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We'll take that. And we're going to go here. And now Dorim with his life of 5, he will do a move down for a major fall. He would have taken 2 wounds. And then here, when you move Dorim the Bulkhead Brawler down from this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 level cliff, you must roll 1 attack die for the fall, because the cliff is equal to or greater than his height of 4. And you don't roll a skull, so Dorim the Bulkhead Brawler is safe. Moving on to water. When you move onto a water space from any other space, even from another water space, you must end your movement immediately, even if your figure has some movement spaces left. So, for this example here, when you move one of your knaves of the Silver Scimitar into the water space, she must stop there. Either one. And a special note about double-spaced figures, that water only stops double-spaced figures if they move their entire base onto water. We'll go over double-spaced figures in just a moment. Moving from water to land. Water tiles do not add a level to the space they are placed on. For water spaces that are lower than the adjacent land spaces, the moving up rule applies. When moving from water to land, count the side of each land space as you move. So for this example, we'll move this knave of the Silver Scimitar again out of the water, and it would be 1 for the side, 2, then we'll just say we'll go 3, 4, 5. Why you would move that weird path, I don't know. But you started on the water space and you moved up to the adjacent land space. You counted the 2 spaces because the water is 1 lower level than that land space. The knave of the Silver Scimitar then moves its 3 additional spaces for its total move of 5. Moving a double-spaced figure. Some figures, like Zenithrax the Vine Weaver, or in this case Raylan the Curie Warrior, take up 2 spaces. When moving a double-spaced figure, decide which side to lead with. You can choose either side, even if the figure looks like it's moving backwards. Then move that figure so that the other end enters the same spaces that the leading end just left. Always end a double-spaced figure's move on 2 spaces of the same level. A double-space figure does not have to stop when it moves over one water space between two land spaces, but it does have to stop when it moves onto two adjacent water spaces. And note in this example that Raylan the Carry Warrior can fly, so normally she would not count extra spaces when moving up. But the battle can move in mysterious ways, and sometimes she might lose her ability to fly temporarily, such as when someone activates the Glyph of Ranvig. Let's look at how to move a double-space figure like Raylan the Carry Warrior if they cannot fly. So, for example, here, we'll move her total move value of 6. And that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And note that even though you didn't have to stop when you crossed the one water space, you still had to count the moving up to go out. Flipping a double-spaced figure. Anytime during a double-spaced figure's move, you may flip it. You might choose to flip it to your figure on the available spaces better, or to flip a double-spaced figure, turn it right around while keeping it on the same two spaces. The flip is free. It does not count as part of your move. The double-spaced figure does not take any leaving engagement attacks when it is flipped, since it is staying on the same two spaces. Leaving engaging attacks will be explained on page 16 of the rulebook if you have it, or later in this video. Obstacles. Barriers such as walls and trees are known as obstacles. A figure cannot move onto or through an obstacle space. If a specific obstacle has additional rules, those rules will be defined in the scenario book that accompanies that obstacle. Overhang. An overhang exists when one or more tiles are above another tile with the space in between. Figures that are small enough to do so may move under overhangs. Note that right here, the Knave of the Silver Scimitar on this water tile could move under this overhang. However, the Frostclaw Paladin, he's too big. He could not. Figures can also move up onto low overhangs, as long as their height and move value are enough to do so. To determine the levels of an overhang, count the nearby support tiles. Knight Irene counts the nearby support tiles as she moves onto this overhang right here. So it would be 1, the nearby support tile would be 2, and then 3 to get up there. Keep the base on the space. When you end a figure's move, make sure its base lies flat and is on only that space, or spaces in the case of double-spaced figures. No part of its base may overlap onto another space or the area between spaces. No. Tight quarters. A battlefield may have narrow passageways, walls, or overhangs that limit the movement of some figures. A figure cannot move through or onto a space that it cannot fit onto completely. For example, here we'll use Zenithrax the Vineweaver. She can't move into this space right here because she's too big. Her wings and tails prevent her from standing completely flat. She also could not go down in there, into that. Just very few spaces that she's going to fit. Note that this is legal. Mine just got warm and warped a little bit, but she could stand flat. And in this example, no figure could occupy this space because Zenithrax the Vineweaver's tail is in the way. I think you might be able to get a Firelag spider under there. Ha! And the base is on the space. The battle can continue. I fixed that. Engagement and adjacency rules. A figure is engaged when it is adjacent to an enemy figure. We will say that this Knave of the Silver Scimitar is an enemy to both Loviatok and this Frostclaw Paladin. So, friendly figures can be adjacent to one another, but not engaged with each other. So if there was another Knave right there, they are not engaged because they're friendly figures. To become adjacent, two figures must be on spaces that are only one space apart. Double-space figures count adjacency and engagement from both sides of their spaces. However, there are exceptions. If one figure's base is on a level equal to or higher than the height of the other figure, they are not adjacent, and therefore are not engaged, even if they are enemies. So this Knave of the Silver Scimitar is not adjacent to Loviatok the Carry Warrior, because Loviatok the Carry Warrior is on a ledge that is higher than the Knave of the Silver Scimitar's height of 4. Leaving an engagement. Your figures may move around an opponent's figure that is engaged with without any difficulty, but as soon as your figure moves away onto a space that is not adjacent, the opponent's figure make a leaving engagement attack against your figure. To do this, the player who controls the opposing figure rolls one die, regardless of their attack value. You do not roll any dice to defend your figures. Your back is turned as you leave. If a skull is rolled, your figure receives 1 wound, and you'd place the wound marker on its army card. So if this Knave of the Silver Scimitar was trying to move away, here's fine, here's fine, here's fine, here's fine, but if you went here, the Frostclaw Paladin, in this case, would kill him. Multiple engagements are possible. Your figure may become engaged with more than one figure at the same time. As you leave each engagement, that opposing figure may roll 1 attack die. For each skull rolled, your figure receives 1 wound. So in this example, when you move Rakshot, the Steward of Death, away from the 2 opposing Frostclaw Paladins, your opponent may roll 1 die for each Frostclaw Paladin. And the 2 skulls are rolled, inflicting 2 wounds. You'd then place 2 wound markers on Rakshot, Steward of Death's army card. And the third action you could take on your turn, which is also optional, is attack with figures on the army card. Now it's time for you to attack with your hero or squad. So who can attack? Any figure or figures represented by your chosen army card that are within range and have a clear line of sight to a target can attack. If no figure on your army card meets these 2 conditions, then no attack is possible. Looking for hidden figures. At any time, feel free to walk around the battlefield to find out which figures are hiding behind raised terrain, areas, or walls, for example. As you explore in this way, the other player may want to shield their order markers so that you can't see them. Before attacking with a figure, check if its range and line of sight as follows. First, you'd check the range. For example, Bakbar now has a range of 5, so he can attack any figures that he has clear line of sight for within 5 spaces. A figure with a range of 1 can only attack a figure in an adjacent space. A double space figure can attack from either space that it occupies. So Raylan could attack all the figures adjacent to her. When checking range, don't count extra spaces for any difference in levels. This would be 1, 2, 3. You wouldn't be counting up. If the distance between your figure and the target figure includes an area with no spaces, for example, near the edge of the battlefield, you may still attack it, but you must count the spaces along the edge of the battlefield to check range. 1, 2, 3. If one of your figures is engaged with 1 or more opposing figures, your figure may attack only those figures. Note that a figure does not need line of sight to attack a figure that is engaged with or adjacent to. Note that you can attack around other figures. You may attack figures even if other figures are between your figure and the target figure, but you must still have clear line of sight to attack. Line of sight is as follows. To attack a figure, your figure must be able to, quote-unquote, see them from its location. Line of sight is an imaginary straight line between your attacking figure's target point and the target figure's hit zone, which are shown on the figure's army cards. The target point is the green dot of the attacking figure. So, for example, Bakbar Na right in the center of his head. And the hit zone is the red area on the targeted figure's army cards. Unlike range, line of sight has nothing to do with these spaces on the battlefield. To determine if there is a clear line of sight, check the target point and the hit zone. Then get behind your figure and look to see if its target point can quote-unquote see any part of the target figure's hit zone. If so, there is a clear line of sight. So, Bakbar Na, Dorim the Bulkhead Brawler, is not a great human shield because you can still see the Rakshot Steward of Death. Line of sight is legal here. And adjusting your figures. Players may only touch or move their own figures and may do so only on their own turns. For example, you cannot adjust your figure out of the line of sight during an opponent's turn. And we will see here in this example how to determine if a figure is within the attacker's range and line of sight. So for this example, you're using Killian Vane III's Blunderbuss special attack, which has a range of 4. You want your Killian Vane III to attack Rakshot, Steward of Death, so first you count the spaces from Killian Vane III to Rakshot, Steward of Death. Rakshot, Steward of Death is only 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces away, so they are just within range of Killian Vane's special attack. Then you check for a clear line of sight from Killian Vane III's target point to Rakshot, Steward of Death's hit zone. Knight Irene is in the way, however, Killian Vane III can still see part of Rakshot, Steward of Death's hit zone, so he can attack. As seen here. Those tendrils getting you targeted. Attacking. The figures on your chosen army card can attack one at a time in any order you choose. Each figure can attack only once per turn unless they have a special power that says otherwise, but each figure can attack the same figure or a different figure. Before attacking, consider any height advantage, special powers, and glyphs that affect your attack, as explained soon. The snooze you lose rule. If you forget to do this, tough luck, maybe next time you'll remember. Height advantage. If the base of one figure is on a higher level than the base of another figure, no matter their actual size or height, the figure on the higher level has height advantage and rolls one extra die for their either attack or defense. If the base of the higher figure is 10 or more levels higher than the base of the lower figure, the higher figure instead rolls 2 attack dice for either attack or defense. The 10 or more levels higher than the base of the other figure is going to be even rarer than probably most other things in the game, because right here Xenothrax the Vine Weaver has a height of 12, so Loviatak is still considered adjacent and engaged because Xenothrax is one of the few figures tall enough to reach that height. So Loviatak the Kiri Warrior would get 2 extra dice for either attack or defense when doing a normal attack or defending. Special powers and special attacks. Many figures have special powers that help them move, attack, defend, and more. Check your figure's army card to see if there are any special powers that your figure can use. If your army card includes a special attack, which will have the words special attack in the name, you may use this attack instead of a normal attack. Special powers and special attacks work a little differently. Some glyphs give the attacker or the defender an advantage. Glyph powers will be explained later. To carry out an attack, follow these steps. Set up the attack. Announce which figure is the attacker and which figure is the defender. My Knave of the Silver Scimitar is going to attack Rakshot's Steward of Death. Note that sometimes friendly figures can get in the way of big attacks, have interesting special powers when they are destroyed, or are accidentally targeted by confused friendly figures. Whatever the reasoning, it is important to remember that you can attack friendly figures. When you do, they become the defender and follow the remaining steps as normal. Number 2 would be roll the attack dice. So you would check the attack value on your attacker's army card, adding extra dice for height advantage special powers or glyphs. Then roll that number of attack dice. After you roll, the defender rolls a number of defense dice equal to the defense value on the defending army card, adding any extra dice earned for height advantage special powers or glyphs. So these Knaves of the Silver Scimitar have an attack of 3. And that was a terrible roll. Because this is a squad, we have another unit that can try it, so we'll try again. There we go, we rolled 1. So you'd resolve the attack. For every skull, also called a hit, the attacker rolls, the defender must roll at least 1 shield to block it. Important, for attack rolls, the attacker only counts skulls, hits. For defense rolls, the defender only counts shields. Compare the number of skulls, hits, and shields rolled to determine the effect of the attack. So Rakshot Steward of Death defends and rolls 1 shield, so that attack would be negated. Unsuccessful attack. If the attacker rolls the same number of skulls, hits, or fewer than the defender rolls shields, the attack is unsuccessful, and that attack is over. However, if Rakshot Steward of Death did not roll any shields, the attacker rolls more skulls, hits, than the defender rolls shields, the attack would be successful. For each unblocked skull the attacker rolled, 1 wound marker would be placed on the defending army card. Life. When a hero figure has as many wound markers as life on the value of its army card, it is destroyed. The player who controls the destroyed figure places that figure on the army card. When all figures represented by an army card have been destroyed, that army card is out of play. Do not expose any unrevealed order markers that are on that card for the current round of play until that turn would begin. In future rounds, you can't place any order markers or take any turns with that card. At the beginning of the next round, any order markers still on that army card are removed and can be placed again as normal. Squads and life. Most squad figures have only 1 life each, and do not track wounds the same way as heroes do. When a successful attack is made against a squad figure, that figure is destroyed and placed on its army card. Do not add wound markers to squad army cards. Some squad figures have more than 1 life each. When these figures take 1 or more wounds, place the wound markers next to their figure on the battlefield to keep track. So we will say that this Frostclaw Paladin has received a wound. Make sure to move them along with the figure if it moves. Like heroes, a multi-life squad figure is destroyed when it has wound markers next to it equal to or greater than its life value. If a special power refers to the number of wound markers on a figure's army card, a single figure in a multi-life squad counts the wound markers next to it on the battlefield, and only its own wound markers, not the wound markers of its squad mates. Destroying a common figure when your army includes 2 or more of the same army card. If your army includes 2 or more of the same army card that is common, follow this rule when a common figure is destroyed. When the first figure represented by your common army card is destroyed, you may place it on any matching army card. Continue placing destroyed figures of that type on the same card until it is full. A common army card is full when the number of matching destroyed figures have been placed equal to the number of figures depicted on that card. If a figure is destroyed and a matching common army card already has a destroyed figure on it, you must fill up that card first before placing any destroyed figures on an empty matching army card. After you've finished attacking, your turn is over. The player to your left will then take a turn. And just one final example of an attack here. One of your knaves of the Silver Scimitar, we'll say the green four-armed one, attacks Zenithrax the Vineweaver. You'd roll 3 attack dice. Zenithrax the Vineweaver has height advantage, so she adds 1 die to her defense value of 3. Your opponent rolls 4 defense dice for Zenithrax the Vineweaver. So we'll say your knave of the Silver Scimitar rolls 2 skulls. Zenithrax, your opponent, the Vineweaver, rolls no shields. Zenithrax the Vineweaver would then take 2 wounds. Place 2 wound markers on Zenithrax the Vineweaver's army card. Zenithrax the Vineweaver already had 6 wound markers from its previous attacks. She now has 8 wound markers, the same as her life value. Thus, she would be destroyed. Your opponent places Zenithrax the Vineweaver on her army card, but leaves the order marker there. When it's her turn to reveal their order marker number 2, they must end their turn immediately, because we would say that this was order marker number 2 for this guy, and that would pass the turn over to Zenithrax the Deadweaver. And ending a round. After the last player takes their 3rd turn, the round is over. If no one has won yet, move the round marker ahead 1 space on the track. Players then begin a new round by placing order markers, then rolling for initiative. Ending the battle. The game scenario sets the victory conditions for each game. Sometimes winning isn't as easy as destroying all your opponent's figures. However, if the game hasn't ended before you've played a certain number of rounds, you may decide that the player or team with the most points wins. That's scoring. Scoring, in cases where scoring is necessary, each player's team scores points for each army card with figures still on the battlefield, referring to the point values on its army card. Squads. If part of the squad has been destroyed, divide the points value by the number of figures in the squad to get the value for each individual figures. So for this example, we'll say 3 of your knaves of the Silver Scimitar were destroyed. You have 1 left on the battlefield. The point value for the squad is 65. 65 divided by 4 equals 16.25. You would score 16.25 points for the knave of the Silver Scimitar that is still alive. Heroes. If a hero has no wound markers on its army card, you score points equal to its full points value. If there are any wound markers on a hero's army card, you will score partial points. Divide the figure's points value by its life value to determine how much each wound costs in its points. These wound marker points will reduce the total points for the scored figure. So we'll say here in this example, Iwashia, Master of Tides, has a points value of 115 and a life value of 4. 115 divided by 4 is 28.75. Iwashia, Master of Tides, has, we'll say, 2 wound markers on an army card. For each wound marker, subtract 28.75 from Iwashia, Master of Tides' points value of 115. 115 minus 28.75 is 86.25, minus 28.75 again for the second wound is 57.5. Iwashia, Master of Tides, with 2 wounds is worth 57.5 points at the end of a game. Glyphs. Depending on the scenario, glyphs are placed on the top of the battlefield spaces either power side up or symbol side up. Glyphs are stationary unless it is otherwise stated in the scenario. When one of your figures moves onto a glyph that is symbol side up, stop there and turn the glyph power side up. The powers on that glyph take effect immediately. When one of your figures lands on a power side up glyph, that must stop and activate the glyph's effect. Note that double-space figure must stop when its leading side moves onto a glyph. So if Raylan was leading with her tail end, it would be 1, 2 before she had to stop on that one. Some glyphs grant temporary powers, while others grant longer-lasting ones. The powers of each glyph are described in the Battlefield and Scenario book in the Age of Annihilation Master set that accompanied them, or in the various rulebooks from the other expansions and sets that these glyphs came in. Special powers. The special powers of the figures keep each game exciting, challenging, and unpredictable. Always be aware of the special powers your figures possess. They can make a big difference in your game. There's going to be special attacks, which, for example, Xenothrax the Vineweaver has Erupting Earth special attack. Special attacks are always going to have special attack in their title. A figure with special power that contains special attack in its name can use the described attack instead of making a normal attack during its turn. Special attacks have range and attack values like normal attacks and follow normal attack rules except where modified. They are often modified by the special powers listed as part of their text, so read carefully to find out what makes the attack so special. Special attacks can never be modified by glyphs, other special powers, or height advantages. Attack dice and defense dice. Combat dice are used for both attack dice and defense dice. Anytime an army card refers to an attack dice or defense dice, use combat dice. The reason that is important is because when the game first came out, the dice were different. You'd had your defense die and your attack die. No shields on this one, no skulls on this one. Later on, the game just combined them because the same amount of symbols were on the die. So, when it tells you to just roll these instead, when it mentions attack or defense, that just negates people believing that these would cause some sort of rules issue or prevent new design space on figures from being explored. Minimum 0. Some special powers, glyphs, or other game rules may subtract dice from an attack or defense roll, remove results, or otherwise lower the roll. No roll can contain less than 0 dice or result in a number that is less than 0. And clear sight spaces. Loviatak, the Curie Warrior's Brutality Aura, mentions clear sight. To determine clear sight, use Loviatak, the Curie Warrior's Target Point. If she can see any part of your figure, not just the hit zone, and your figure is within 4 spaces of her, they are affected by the Brutality Aura as they are considered in clear sight. Multiple targets. When a special attack targets more than one figure at the same time, the attacker decides the order in which the defenders will roll combat dice for each figure affected. When a figure is destroyed, some special powers have lingering effects on gameplay. Most special powers no longer important when a figure is destroyed. Knight Irene can't run if she's dead. But others like Mizrax the Kyrie Warrior's Life Drain Spirit can happen after she is destroyed. As such, it is important to remember that special powers can still affect the game even if the figure is destroyed. Conflicting timing. When 2 or more special powers would activate at the same time, the player who controls the involved figures each roll the 20-sided die. Whoever rolls the highest result determines the order in which the special powers are resolved. If a special power can no longer be used because it is a different special power was used first, it is prevented. Conflicting special powers. If a special power contradicts the core rules, the special power's rules override the core rules in that instance. If 2 special powers contradict each other, cannot overrides may. For example, there, if a figure's special power says it cannot be moved, and another figure's special power says it may or simply does move another figure, that figure cannot be moved, overrides any special power that says otherwise. Keywords. Some special powers are both common and contain a surplus of text. In these cases, just the name of the special power is written on army cards. The full text of special powers are listed in the rulebook that accompanies the army cards that were in that pack. For example, flying is listed there, and the rules would be in the rule book that came with this figure, which was the Age of Annihilation Master set. Speaking of flying and overhangs have some rules as well. Figures can ascend overhangs while flying, but cannot pass through the bottom of them. For example, Anshu the Welkanai flies out from under the overhang to move to the top, ignoring spaces for elevation. So, 1, 2. Special power references on army cards. Some special powers reference the species, personality, Valkyrie, unique, uncommon, common, hero, squad, and or class of other figures. When they do, they may refer to all figures with that tag simply as that tag. For example, Key to the Spring Runner has a Beast class. When the command familiar special power refers to a beast, Key to the Spring Runner would count. So, command familiar. After revealing an order marker on Awashia, Master of Tides, before taking Awashia's turn, you may take a turn with a small or medium beast you control. Key to the Spring Runner. Boom, small. Boom, beast. Take a turn. Simultaneous special powers. If you and an opponent are using army cards with special powers that happen at the same time, you must each roll the 20-sided die to see who gets to use them first. Whoever rolls the highest result activates their special power first. Army card on a power. Army card refers to any number of army cards that designate the same common squad or hero or uncommon hero in an army. Using multiple master sets and or expansion sets. Combining 2 or more master sets or collecting expansion sets gives you lots of new options. You can create a supersized battlefield and play with any number of players. You can even boost the point value of your armies to match the bigger battlefield, but along with that comes extra excitement and a few special rules. Unique army cards. If you're combining 2 sets of army cards, make sure that no player has more than one of the same unique army card in their army. For example, your army can't include 2 Rakshot Steward of Death. However, you and an opponent can both have a copy of the same unique army cards. For example, you and your opponent can each have 1 Knight Irene in your armies. Unique army cards with the same name. Sometimes heroes and squads from the past will return with new special powers and values gained through the passage of time and the thrill of battle. Even though their army cards are not exactly the same, you still cannot have 2 copies of an army card with the same name in your army. So sorry, no triple Sergeant Drake Alexander armies for you. Marking your figures. If you are playing with multiple sets or expansion sets, you may want to mark using a permanent marker, stickers, or anything else that you can to mark the underside of your figure's bases to remember who owns which figure. And there you have it. That is the master rule set for the tabletop game Heroscape. It is a game that has very simplistic rules, however strategy can get deep. The game is amazing. I suggest you dive in, get expansions, get the master set. Just have fun with it. This is a fantastic game, and it is great for kids, great for adults, it's great for families, it's great for game night. It is just a fun game all around. I have not introduced this game to anyone who has not enjoyed it in some capacity, whether that be through playing the master game with all of its complexities, or just the basic game, which is simple and it is just what some people would like. Either way, Heroscape is a game that has continued to give every time I've brought it to the table. I looked, and it appeared there were no special rules associated with the lower walls. They are just a line of sight blocker. And I stacked them next to some other tiles here, and they are 12 height, as far as I can tell.